Welcome. Thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind giving us a like, and consider going ahead and subscribing as well, that would be fantastic. And if you really want to go the extra mile, go down to the description below and click the Patreon link. Lots of cool stuff going on there. As always, I love you, and enjoy the show, guys.
The DeathWorlders, a story by user Hambone. Chapter 23, Back Down to Earth. Part 4. Date point, 10 years, 2 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day after Vancouver. Vancouver General Hospital, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, Earth. Xiu Chang. White. White and beeping. And sort of a soft blue. Greens, too. Hints of scarlet light, and a click-hiss valve noise that corresponded to a strange pressure in her chest. Blink, frown, focus. A question floated across her mind in 3 languages. Where ye nali? That wasn't right. Wo king I? She am nali? So hard to think. She tried to take a calming breath, clear her head, and something started to make an alarming sound. Shoo! Shoo! Nurse! Nurse, help! Purple. Moving purple and dark skin and a soothing tone, like Ima comforting a wailing cub. It's okay, she's just awake, it's okay, shh, darling, don't fight the ventilator, it's okay, you're safe. Shoo? What was a shoo? Oh, right. Nurse, ventilator, hospital, Earth. So hard to think, but those strangers by her bedside. The tiny elderly woman in tears, the skinny old balding man holding her hand with stress plowing his forehead, the tall fat man behind them with his hands on their... No, that was wrong. She didn't have a big brother, her parents weren't... Okay, honey, shh, calm now. I'm sorry, this is really distressing her. We'd better put her under again. It's okay, darling. You're just not ready yet. It's okay. Something in her left hand. Something that made all the wrong go away. Something... White. And colors. Cards by her bed. Get well soon. We missed you. Welcome home. There was no beeping this time. No hissing or clicking. Nothing in her throat doing her breathing for her. Just... Yes, a drip in her hand, and darkness outside the window. Warm yellow light through a slightly ajar door, admitting hushed conversation. Shu sat up, cautiously. She was alone. She had time to gather her thoughts, assess the situation. Fact check. She was in a hospital, with a drip in her hand. The gravity felt normal. The air had a certain richness to it, warm and nourishing. She couldn't tell what the voices outside were saying. Their volume was much too tactful for that. But the cadences sounded English. She carefully selected the right word. Hello? The conversation outside ceased, and then there were brisk footsteps, a rustle of scrubs, and a middle-aged nurse poking her head round the door. Her face lit up on seeing Shu. Oh! Hi! Shu froze, having not planned the conversation this far ahead. Hi, Oh, it's okay, honey. You're a bit disoriented right now, eh? A little? Shu nodded. I'm in Vancouver? Yep. The nurse patted the bed. I'm Liz. Am I okay to sit down? Sure. Liz did so, settling comfortably next to her. "You and your friends made a stir when you showed up. You especially." I did? Oh, where am I? I'm sorry. Can I get you something, sweetie? No solids until the doctors say otherwise, but I could call up for some soup. Actually, that'd be really nice. Yes, please. Okay. You'll be okay for a few seconds? Shu nodded for her and managed a little smile. Liz wasn't long. Shu heard her feet in the hall, a quick conversation, and she returned in only a minute or two. Still, it was long enough for Shu to sort out her head and think through the most pressing questions she had. "So," Liz said, bustling back in, "where were we?" "Are my friends okay?" Shu asked her. "Julian and Allison?" "They're fine. They're asleep right now, but they're just fine. You had the worst of it, actually." "I did?" Liz gestured with her hand, raising her left arm and touching a spot on her ribs with an expression hinting for Shu to do the same. "When she did, there was a dressing there." "You've been asleep for about 3 days," Liz told her. "There were a couple of operations. Dr. Spilney will explain it all in the morning." "Can I see them?" "In the morning, sweetie. You're all pretty badly hurt. You need to rest." Liz's tone was kindly and comforting, but firm enough to convince Shu she wouldn't get her way there. She looked at the cards on her bedside again. "We caused a stir?" "Especially you. Vancouver's own prodigal daughter, gone these 10 years and... 10 years?" Shu's hand flew to her face in shock. "How long were we... right. The escape pod. Stasis." "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetie. That just came out. I'm sorry." Liz soothed. "No, it's okay. I knew it was going to be about that, but..." Shu rubbed her face. It didn't help. Her hands were shaking. So were her shoulders, and there was an urgent heat coming up from deep inside her, behind her eyes. Liz, demonstrating the sixth sense of mothers and nurses the world over, pulled her into a hug before the tears even arrived, and let her get it out of her system. "I'm home. God, I made it. I'm home." "Yes, you did." Shu disengaged gently and sat up, wiping her cheeks. "Sorry." "Don't even apologize to me, sweetie. It's okay." Liz smiled warmly and indicated that Shu's soup had arrived sometime while she hadn't been paying attention. Shu didn't need prompting. She scooped it up and, after a tentative sip to make sure it wasn't too hot, devoured the lot. It wasn't the greatest soup ever, but it was warm, it was comforting, it was chicken, and it was amazing how many things in the galaxy didn't taste like chicken, and it lasted maybe 30 seconds. "Phew!" Liz made an appreciative noise. "You needed that, eh?" "Oh, God, yes." Shu wiped a little from the corners of her mouth, trying not to be embarrassed. "Do you think you can sleep some more? You really should." It surprised Shu to note that she was in fact feeling exhausted. Hadn't she been asleep for a few days? But Liz's suggestion actually sounded really good right now. Yeah, I think I can," she said. "Okay, we'll be just outside if you need anything. Call if you need anything." Shu promised she would and settled back onto her pillow. Liz fussed gently in making sure she was properly tucked in, then bade her good night, and left, leaving the door open. That left only the ceiling in dim light and one thought as Shu fell asleep. I'm home. Date point: 10 years, 2 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day after Vancouver. Byron Group Head Offices, Omaha, Nebraska, USA, Earth. Kevin Jenkins. My God, what happened? Kevin could see why the question was being whispered. Moses Byron, who was always the picture of smiling confidence and vitality, looked stressed. Pale, even. Rather than striding into the room in his usual blustering style, he more shuffled. Thoughtfully. Did somebody die? Shh. Byron took a moment to survey the crew of BGEV-8, assorted board members and department heads, and cleared his throat. Been a development, he croaked and cleared his throat again. This planning session is canceled. I'll let you know personally when we reschedule. For now, he coughed. Rachel, recall GEV-9 and GEV-10. Tell them under no circumstances are they to use their jump drives. They've got to come back the old-fashioned way. Mr. Byron, that'll take them months, somebody protested. Moses held up his hand. I know. I ain't changing my mind, Trevor, some fine folks will be along later today to take a good look at your department. Give them full access to everything, and I mean everything, including Project Ophanim. Nobody said a word. They just exchanged bewildered and slightly scared expressions. Finally, Byron spoke again, looking at Kevin. Everybody whose name isn't Kevin Jenkins, go find something to do. I don't care what it is. Go home early if you want. Go on. People practically fled. Based on the little chat I just had with the halls of power in this great nation of ours, Byron began once the last door was closed. It seems I need to hire me a no-man. Somebody who, if I've got 50 people kissing my ass and telling me we're golden, if I look at you and you shake your head, we bury that idea and never speak of it again. Sound like something you can do? Does this thing come with a salary? Kevin asked. He judged it correctly. Byron laughed. Ha! And an office, he said. Though if half the things I hear about your cooking are true, I might include attending to the comestibles on your list of duties. I could be persuaded to take a job like that. Good, good. Byron cleared his throat again. We dodged a bullet. By this much, he confided, holding up 2 narrowly spaced fingers for illustration. Dodged at least 2 by my count, Kevin agreed. Yeah? I'll see you in the office tomorrow. You got a place to stay? HR already got my hotel room sorted out, Kevin told him. Guess I'd better see them about somewhere more permanent, huh? You do that, Byron agreed. He shook Kevin's hand and wandered out of the room, clearly still deep in thought. Kevin's mission pay had already been sorted out, and thanks to the miracle of modern digital banking, calling and paying for a taxi were effectively the same thing. He'd planned on leaving Earth forever. He distinctly remembered how the word had felt as he spoke it. Forever. Not for 5 years. Not until something better came along. Forever. Get himself out of his estranged daughter's life and never look back. It was the first time he'd even thought of her in years, and he ambled through the hotel lobby and into the elevator in a pensive mood, only shaking himself back into the here and now as the doors opened with a chime. He was about to swipe his phone to open the door lock when a thought occurred to him. Experimentally, he knocked on his own hotel room door. Come in. The door wasn't locked, and Special Agent Williams was sitting in the large, comfortable chair by the window, putting down a tablet. Well done, she added. You have good instincts. Save it, Kevin muttered and sat on his bed. Look, Williams. Ah, she raised a finger. Small note on tradecraft for you. Williams is a cover name. Professionally, and to you, I go by Darcy. Special Agent Darcy, if you want to be formal. Darcy, huh? That a fake name, too? If it was, why would I tell you? She smiled again. I would have introduced myself as Darcy if you hadn't dug up Williams to say hello. Pardon me for spoiling your entrance, Kevin deadpanned. So, what? Are you offering me a job as well? I am, she agreed. Though I suspect the title won't be as impressive as whatever it is Byron's calling your new role. Comestible attendant. Either Darcy's professional facade genuinely did slip for a moment, or else she was by a league the most flawless liar Kevin had ever met. Ha! She giggled, and raised a hand to cover her mouth. Oh, that's good. I like that. So what would my job be? Kevin asked her, deciding he probably had got through to the real woman under the Company Act, whoever she was, and allowing himself a satisfied smile. Oh, exactly the same as you're doing for Moses Byron. Veto any ideas of his that strike you as unwise. You'll need, well... She hefted a light black satchel from beside her chair and handed it to him. Inside was a brand new Samsung tablet still in its box and some kind of a black device to attach to it. What's the box do? Kevin asked. Encryption, decryption, secure communications, Darcy shrugged. Don't plug it into any device other than that tablet. What'll it do? Explode? No, it just won't work, but it would still technically be a felony. Communication with what? Kevin pressed. A secure server, Darcy said. Full of briefings and reports and documents that you'll need to read
though I suspect that a lot of what's in there won't come as much of a surprise to you.
Kevin nodded. Just 2 more questions. Darcy sat back and delicately crossed her legs.
Shoot.
1. Why me? I ain't exactly the model of ambitious patriotism, you know.
10 years ago, you drove up to the front gates of Scurf carrying the kind of intelligence we were absolutely starving for, Darcy told him. You've clearly got something that does the job of ambition, even if it's just that you'd rather not get nuked from orbit. Certainly you're smart enough to know that as a real possibility, and you've taken active steps, potentially at risk to your own liberty in person, to combat it. She inclined her head. Now, would you say that somebody like that wasn't worth our time?
Kevin frowned and didn't answer.
What's your second question? Darcy prompted him, eventually.
Does this thing come with a salary? Date point. 10 years, 2 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day after Vancouver. HMNB Folktha, Planet Cimbrian, The Far Reaches. John Burgess. Whoa! Hey, I thought you were gone for the day, man. Adam just shrugged and hung his light bag by the door. I took a day, got to sort out some things, got my head right, but you know me, I gotta be doing shit to think right, you hear me? I hear you, John agreed. I was gonna lift. Nuh-uh, we're wrestling. Now. 50 seconds later, the mat was grinding painfully against John's face, and his arm felt like it was 1 newton of force at most from dislocating. So, Adam shifted his posture just a little bit while John's feet scrabbled ineffectually for purchase. Let's talk about how you kept my cheating ex's secret for her, brother. Date point, 10 years, 2 months, 2 weeks, and 5 days after Vancouver. Folktha, Planet Cimbrian, The Far Reaches. Ava Rios. Ready?
No.
They're calling.
I know, I just...
Ava took one last look. It would have been nice to think of Folktha as her home, but it wasn't. Not anymore. Not really. It was all white buildings and parks and streets now. There were cars. There was the beginning of a rail network to connect to the outlying farms and villages. There was a thriving street or two full of shops. There was a supermarket. There were paved roads, advertisements, the neon green cross of a pharmacy. It was a town now. It wasn't the Folktha she'd lived in. She could remember little wooden chalets tucked between the native trees. She could remember being happy in a place that might have been here but wasn't here. She could remember. But that's all it was. Memory.
I'm ready.
Charlene and Ben waved sadly to her from beyond the glass. She'd already said goodbye to Gabe and Adam. She wasn't surprised he hadn't come. Jess had to work. Haley had left Cimbrian years ago. She presented her passport, stepped through the security arch, shuffled into place on the jump array's deck alongside Sean, and fidgeted as the last few people did likewise. The gate was closed. There was a short countdown, and she was on Earth. The Earth end of the Byron Group's commercial jump array was Hamburg Airport. And Ava could sense being on a different planet, even if the architecture hadn't suddenly and confusingly changed without so much as a flicker. Folktha's municipal gravity generator might have exactly duplicated Earth gravity, but it couldn't duplicate the heavy richness of the air. It was like coming down from mountaintop to sea level. It was warmer, denser, more oxygenated, and more humid. Earth was a hot planet by galactic standards, and doomed to get hotter despite the rapid 180 and carbon dioxide production over the last 8 years. She could taste and smell that fact in every breath.
So, Hamburg.
She hoisted her bag. Beside her, Sean snapped the drag handle up from his and kicked it over into his hand. Yep.
Are we flying back to London?
That's cheapest, Sean agreed.
How cheap?
50 quid each.
Good.
They passed through another security arch.
I can afford that.
I won't hear of it, Sean told her. You're going to need that money.
But...
You're going to need a job. That means buses and the tube and maybe a taxi or two. So keep your money and use it. You can pay me back once you're earning.
You can afford that?
She asked. I've been writing articles for a bunch of different news sites and blogs, working part-time at Spoons. Sean shrugged. I can afford it. Just. I was probably going to wind up looking for a lodger anyway. Rent in London being what it is, I'd have made a fuck of a lot too, but, money's less important than helping you get on your feet. Touched, Ava managed a smile for him. Besides, Sean added, I've got something coming up. My Uncle Simon gets back from Angola next week. If he follows through on what he was talking about in his emails, maybe you and me, we could land on our feet.
What's he doing in Angola?
Covering the election for Reuters.
I've still got that offer from Byron Group,
Ava noted, glancing at the corporate advertising for the jump array. Earth and Cimbrian photographed from orbit and connected by a line that cycled through all the classic vivid fiber optic colors with the tagline, One Small Step. Moses Byron talks a good game, Sean agreed. Hell, it seems like he walks his talk too. I'm just not... I don't know, do you trust anybody who got that big that quickly? Ava shrugged.
People like his whole ethics and integrity brand. Even if it's just an act for the camera, he's playing that part to the hilt.
Is that the same thing as actually being ethical, though?
Sean, Ava sighed, don't ask me about morals and stuff right now. I don't feel qualified.
He inclined his head slightly, assessing her mood, then nodded and laid his hand gently on her upper back for just a second. Okay. Neither of them said a word to the other for nearly an hour after that, by which point they had boarded their plane, taken off, and reached cruising altitude. He'd been looking out of the window for most of that time. Are we okay? He asked. Ava had been using the plane's Wi-Fi to check her website. She put the tablet down when he spoke and gave the question some thought.
You're my very best friend, Sean. Is that enough? I don't think I've got more than that to give.
He nodded and gave her a hug. I'm sorry, Ava.
You didn't do anything.
No, I did. I got selfish and Sean shrugged. I pushed.
You didn't hurt me, Sean,
Ava reassured him.
I hurt myself.
And I helped.
Yeah, well, you can stop helping me hurt myself by letting me take the blame for this, okay?
She told him.
This whole thing has been a lesson, and I want to learn it, not foist off the responsibility on somebody else.
It was her turn to give him a reassuring squeeze.
You learn your lesson and I'll learn mine, okay?
Sean nodded despondently, aware that the lesson he was going to have to learn was one he wished he didn't have to. Okay. He looked out the window again. That makes sense. Date point. 10 years, 2 months, 2 weeks, and 6 days after Vancouver. Uncharted system. Deep space. Vedregnenug.
Show up. There we go. It seems we escaped.
Vedrig allowed a mingled pulse of relief and released anxiety to highlight his body. A human would have shuddered.
I detest stasis, he declared. Death or life on the moment of a button press. Thank you for sparing us any anticipation.
Kirk dropped his lower right hand, the prosthetic one, off the escape pod's control panel and gave a pleased nod. And we have indeed arrived at our destination. Good. Their destination, as far as Vedrig could tell, was a system in the middle of nowhere, some 5 years' travel from the final resting place of the starship's sanctuary at the meager 10 kilolights that was their escape pod's top speed. Without the stasis field, they would have starved to death before completing even a fraction of the journey. And theirs was one of the largest, fastest, and best-equipped life pods in their late ship's stable. Most of the others had been much smaller, cruder, and slower. As it was, both of them glanced in the corner and mutually decided not to discuss the DeathWorlder in the room. Lewis had come scrambling into their escape pod seconds before Kirk had sealed it, babbling about Sanctuary's port living area taking a bad hit and separating him from the others. He was now slumped against the wall with his arms on his knees and his forehead resting against them. The escape pod's sensors had reported that all other life rafts had launched alongside theirs, moments before Amir had suicidally rammed and destroyed a hierarchy dreadnought. Despite Lewis pleading and weeping at the console for nearly an hour, however, there had been no response from any of them. He'd finally given up and sunk despondently to the deck, scooted into the corner and gone very still and quiet. Humans were almost as expressive as Governor Agavendragon, sometimes. Some of their emotions played out across their whole bodies. Vedrig could hardly blame him. Subjectively, scant seconds had passed since Lewis had given up on his friends, pointing out that as far as the rest of the galaxy was concerned, they had been dead for 5 years, would have been both unhelpful and tactless. Lewis had every right to grieve.
on the other hand, were much more difficult to fathom without a translator. By the standards of pretty much every other sapient life form, including their evolutionary cousins, the Vizcatic, Kirk's species were renowned for reserved emotions, impenetrable body language, and inscrutable expressions. But if the way Kirk paused upon glancing at Lewis and then patted the grieving human awkwardly on the shoulder was any indication, he was feeling the loss just as intensely. Kirk had always been stoic, even by standards, however. He turned back to the controls and indicated them to Vedrig. "You see?" Vedrig scrutinized the sensor readings.
"That," he noted with a swish of accusatory maroon, "is one of the 2 system defense force fields stolen from a secure military facility of my people. The other of which now protects Cimbrian, I believe."
"Yes." Kirk did not seem to be at all contrite.
"I do not approve of theft."
Vedrig chastised him. "Would you have given permission if I had asked for them?"
"No!"
Then theft was the only option. Kirk tapped some commands and spoke something untranslated in his native tongue, a sound like a handful of gravel being tossed down a staircase.
"I beg your pardon?"
Vedrig asked him. Kirk just made a satisfied nod and then carefully enunciated a stream of rattling domain syllables into the comms console. The system force field deactivated. No sooner had their pod crossed the threshold of where it had once been than it popped back up, with barely a Govnorag's body length of clearance sparing the rear end of the escape pod. Kirk clearly wanted to take no chances with anything hostile following them in. Kirk nodded and turned the translator back on. "Excellent." "Dude," Lewis raised his head. "That wasn't even Kirk's line." "What?" Both of them looked at him. "He said, 'I have been and always will be your friend.'" "You speak Domain?" Kirk asked aghast. "No, I understand Domain." Lewis hauled himself upright. "I couldn't speak Domain if you cut my throat. Where are we?" "How do you understand Domain?" Kirk demanded. "Dude, I've spent months on the same ship as you. I studied it." "But you shouldn't be able to understand it," Kirk protested. "It's a language, isn't it?" Lewis shrugged. "Fuck, I can't pronounce Welsh either, but I could learn that just fine if I wanted. Now where are we, and why is it so goddamn important that you quote Spock at the force field?" Kirk stared at him for a bit, then creaked a prolonged throat clear and called up the system navigation display as the life raft boosted up to 2 lights and headed inwards. "This system has no official name, and I'm not sharing its coordinates as much as I trust the both of you," he said. "Officially, it's unexplored." "And unofficially?" "I explored it." Lewis frowned at him. "Dude, when did you have time?" "It's more or less directly between Supply Station Haven in the Dark and Nightmare, but no space lane passes through here. At Sanctuary's kind of speeds, going cross-country meant having to stop to ground the hull charge at almost every system, and this one has an appropriate gas giant."
"So why are we here?"
Vedrig interjected, shading himself to indicate curiosity. "I found something."
"What did you find?"
"I found out what happened to Milwaukee Station." Vedrig glowed a cocktail of surprised royal blue and solemn green, but Lewis just gave them both a confused frown. "Dude, not everyone in this boat's up to speed on galactic everything," he told them. "What's Milwaukee Station, and what happened to it?" "Milwaukee was a Kuumbura research outpost on the Lavian frontier," Kirk explained. "That's a cluster of stars in extreme, up. That is perpendicular to the galactic plane, in the direction conventionally—" "I know what up means, dude," Lewis snapped. "What happened to it?" "It vanished." "And turned up here?" "Yes." "So we're going to dock there." Kirk hesitated. Yes?"
"How do you do that?" Vedrig objected. "How do you jump to accurate conclusions so quickly? All humans do it. It's infuriating."
Lewis frowned at him with his mouth slightly open. "How do you not?" he countered. "I mean, why the fuck else would we be here? To take a selfie?" "We aren't DeathWorlders," Kirk pointed out. But you still got a working fucking thinker, Lewis exclaimed, nonplussed. Don't give me the ancient evolution, life or death bullshit, whatever. I'd expect anyone to see that one coming unless the only thing they're brains for is holding up their fucking hat. The two non-humans looked at one another. Then Kirk, with an air of extreme delicacy, cleared his throat again. Lewis, are you okay? Lewis's laugh had an incredulous note to it. Are you... Dude, are you forgetting the bit where our friends got killed? Because that has harshed my mellow a tiny fucking bit. He pinched his fingertips together a half-inch apart and peered through the gap to emphasize the point. Will shouting at us bring them back? Kirk asked. What? Well, no. Then what good does it do? Kirk folded all four of his arms. So what? You're not even going to give the four of them any more than, a minute's consideration? Lewis asked. Lewis? Goddamn herd Xenos, man. Fuck! The human spun away into the back of the pod, slumped against the wall, rubbed his face, and then barked an order at the pod. Privacy field! It snapped on in a fuzz of white noise and mercifully obscured him from view. Kirk sagged, shook his head back and forth in a long, slow, swaying arc, and then double-checked the navigation.
Do you have any thoughts on how to help him? Vedrig asked. Not sure what color he should be, and so settled on a kaleidoscope melange of concern, alarm, empathy, fear, and many more. There is one simple trick to helping any human, old friend, Kirk murmured, guiding their lifeboat out of warp. There was what had once been a space station below them, half embedded in the surface of a tiny, irregular lumpen moon that was much too small to have pulled itself into a sphere under its own gravity. The station was broken open, missing power to half its decks, eviscerated from where it had crashed into the surface of the rocky object, but still largely intact. And that is?
Vedrig asked. Merwookie Station.
I meant, and the simple trick is.
Kirk ordered the lifeboat to dock with the station's one remaining powered bay, and turned to face him. You give them the means to fight back. All right, guys. Thanks so much for being here on this one. I really appreciate you watching, listening, making yourselves better people. That's always good. I'm glad you're doing that. I'm really proud of you. Anyway, guys, I am going to go feed my dog because he is whining behind me, and I'm probably sure you can hear that. Stop it, Bubbo! You're my favorite pet. Don't tell Brienne. I'll be out in just a second. But thanks, guys, for watching and listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Go down to the thing. Hit the Patreon. Hit the bell as well. And go to the Discord to talk with people who also like this story and many others like it. All right. I will talk to you guys in the next one. And tell me, what is... Who in history would you say has had the most impact on the world? For good or ill? That's all I got. Talk to you guys in the next one. Bye!